Okay, let's try and get through this. I'm not really feeling good right now. Not really health-wise. Just, kind of in the moody space. Memories of Murder. Now, this is one of the most requested movies that I've ever gotten on this channel. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest here. The first time I saw this film was when I was about 10. It was on TV, and I did not know what was going on. I just understood that it's supposed to be about a murder. These cops are looking for this guy, and that was it. I did not get any of the little MacGuffins that are thrown around here and there. I didn't really understand the importance of the cinematography or the editing or the style that Bong Joon-ho was kind of taking a lot of influences from. I did not get it. So this is kind of the first time that I'm watching it with the perspective of a critic, or at least a perspective that I've finally grown to have now. And I think it's a very important thing to do at this point, because Bong Joon-ho, at this point, alongside maybe Im Kwon-taek and Lee Chang-dong, he's got one of the best filmographies in Korea. He's kind of led the way for the golden age of Korean cinema in the 2000s. His style is clearly distinct, because he kind of molded his own style of modern Korean thrillers while taking foreign influences on the technical side of filmmaking to make his films have a much more broader appeal, which is why he was like the only successful Korean director to kind of transition into the Hollywood group of filmmakers. While like Park Chan-wook and who was the other guy? I can't remember the name, but there's this other guy who made this action movie with Schwarzenegger, and it completely bombed. And compared to those two filmmakers, Bong Joon-ho always had that Hollywood aesthetic within his films all the time. So you can clearly see why he was the one who was able to transition more naturally. So he's got one of the best filmographies in modern Korean cinema. And you can really make a solid argument for any of his movies for being his best. Mother might be his best movie for some people. Snowpiercer might be his best movie for some people. Maybe The Host is the best movie that he's ever made for some people. But whatever you think about those movies that I've mentioned so far, and you might want to argue this with me, but in my humble opinion, Memories of Murder just might be a perfect movie. I'm not sure if that necessarily makes it his best film. It definitely has his best screenplay. It really is a perfect screenplay, but to me, this is one of those rare Korean films where it really gets this close to being perfect. And this is why I'm going to start off with talking about the flaws of this movie, because there's only two that I can think of. One is honestly just this one scene that lasts for like 30 seconds or something. And it's just for the film to establish the political climate at the time, because there's this one scene where there's like these groups of people who are rallying against this other group of militarized policemen, and at the time, because this was set in 1986, we had a director. His name, not director. We had a president. His name was Chun Doo-hwan, and he was like, if you think Trump is bad, you have not read up about Chun Doo-hwan. In my opinion, he was the worst president we ever had. Mostly because he militarized the police force, and then he made the police force literally kill people in the streets, mostly in the city of Gwangju. That was like the big thing that happened. And in the city of Gwangju, he basically told the militarized police force to go in there and kill everybody who was against him, who was rallying against him, who were doing mass protests against the guy. So there's this one scene where it kind of addresses that moment of political strife in Korea, and it's kind of a rushed scene. Like you can tell that the film that the scene is just there for that purpose. It really doesn't serve anything else for the movie. So there's that one scene. That one scene's the problem with the film. And the other thing is that there is one needless detour, in my opinion. There's this one part of the movie where they deal with this pervert that lives in the local area, and I'm not really sure what that pervert had to add to the movie. Like he kind of seemed like a momentary comic relief, and maybe just another character to emphasize the kind of this corruption within the police force that was happening in Korea back in the day. So I'm not really sure if that was really needed. But those two things are the only problems that this movie has. The rest is arguably perfect. So let's get into the technical aspects first before we get into the main theme, which is mostly me dissecting the screenplay. Now, technically, again, like I said, it takes a lot from like really masterful foreign, usually Western filmmakers. The cinematography, first of all, the warm countryside contrasting with the bleak situation that's going on, like the rice fields kind of having this really glowing yellow while the sky looks bleak and gray. It kind of adds this David Lynchian contrasting imagery that adds to the atmosphere of the movie. Then there are these great overhead shots that really feels like some like 70s Scorsese films. Like some of these shots reminds me of like Taxi Driver or Mean Streets. Not really 80s Scorsese, definitely 70s Scorsese when he was like really brutal and raw. Some of the landscape shots kind of has this sophisticated feel of David Fincher's movies, and a lot of the scenes in the police station reminds me of The Silence of the Lambs, which I definitely know as being one of Bong Joon-ho's favorite movies. So you can see all these influences coming together, but it's always done within this Korean aesthetic. I have a hard time. I really want to sit down one day and really kind of hone down what exactly it is that makes some of these movies so Korean, for a lack of a better word. But, yeah, the cinematography is amazing, and I like the way he used MacGuffins in this movie. Like, it's used effectively for tension, the red clothing, the rain, that one song that plays on the radio whenever the murderer, like, does his little thing, and the way one of the detectives, or at least, like, he covers up his shoes with this little sheet before he kicks and tortures some of the people they bring to the police station, and you see these scenes kind of intertwining together, creating this sense of really efficient use of MacGuffins here. And there are amazing imagery kind of setting the mood and the atmosphere, like the faceless scarecrows kind of bringing this ominous tone to the whole thing, or the dark bathroom stalls in the middle schools kind of, again, adding this moody element to it. It's because it's set in the countryside, it's got that mysterious element going on with the old houses, the rice fields and whatnot, these really empty, rickety-looking places kind of adding this really unsettling tone to it all. It feels very unsettling really is the right word here, and the editing, fucking fantastic. It really emphasizes the grotesque, and Bong Joon-ho seems to understand that editing is not simply, putting two scenes together. It's emphasizing a certain emotion. Like, there's this one scene where they're going through this dead body that they just found, and right away it cuts to them like eating some Korean barbecue, and obviously it feels grotesque, it feels weird, it feels disgusting, but that's the point. By showing them eating meat, and right after them going through somebody's body, it emphasizes just how disgusting this display of human indecency it really is. And again, when it comes to Bong Joon-ho's movie, he's always really good at using humor, but not to really be funny. But he usually uses humor to show humanity, whether it's like these really random outbursts of anger or these torture scenes that are so fucked up and they're so wrong, and policemen should not do these things at all, but they add this desperation to what the policemen are doing, this desperation of them wanting to find the murderer. So these torture scenes are funny, but you can see with every single thing they say, or the way their inflections work, you can see the desperation coming from them. And there's this one way of making a joke in this movie that I've noticed. They'll say something really stupid, outrageous, whatever you want to call it, and the next scene would visualize that. So there's this one scene where the main local cop is he's talking about how they're never able to find like body hair around the murder scene. So maybe the murderer, like maybe he like fuck what my I'm not really in a good space right now. My brain's not really working properly these days, so I'm not really sure what I was trying to say. He shaved off his pubes. So the local cop has this theory that the murderer might have shaved off his pubes because they're never able to find body hair around the murder scene. So everybody thinks this is stupid, and the next scene shows him at a bathhouse looking at everybody's crotches, including the kids, which is fucking creepy, but it adds to that sense of desperate humor that the film is going for. That it really adds to their humanity because they want to know the answer. They'll do anything, even the creepiest goddamn shit, to get to the answer. And it's just another example of Bong Joon-ho using comedy in a much more human way, in a much more efficient way. Now, there's also some great use of sound here because before every single major action scene or major investigation scene, there's this complete silence, and then you're suddenly given this bombardment of noise and these like minimal like drum beats, which kind of adds to this immediate rush of tension that they give you. And because it's so immediate, you get into it right away. There's no build-up. They just put you in there with the music. And again, it's kind of like how Nirvana or the Pixies make their music. It's quiet, then it's loud, quiet, then it's loud. And because it's suddenly loud, you get into it right away compared to the other more slowly building up type of music or beats. Acting wise, it's all great. It's all very humanly done, especially Kang-ho, who plays the main local cop. He's always really good at playing the everyday person, and at least when it comes to an everyday Korean person. But there's this one guy, and it's kind of an obvious performance to point out, but there's this one guy who plays the village idiot, and he plays it up to a point where it really could be silly and it really could be corny and really cheesy, but at a certain point he kind of hits this Twin Peaks extent of weirdness and the surreal element to his performance that it becomes so engaging. The second he's on in the film, you're totally into his performance. And the last technical aspect that I want to talk about really is the action in this movie, because this film, action-wise, is very physical. There's this one chase scene that it's probably one of the best chase scenes that I've ever seen, because it's not just simply this guy just running in this really awkward way. Like, you can tell that he's not giving it his all when it comes to the running. But in this film, when you see the main three cops running towards this one guy they're following, it feels so real. Again, the minimalistic drum beats kind of coming in with the immediate rush, and the way they jump over obstacles together, like, it feels so real, it feels so physical. And when they stop and when they're catching their breath, it just, it's so physical, which is something that I've realized that I missed in a lot of these action movies that are coming out these days, because, maybe because the MCU universe, MCU movies, action seems to be more oriented in a action seems less physical these days. It feels like action movies usually focus more on the spectacle than the actual physical exhaustion that these characters would go through. Like, in hindsight, you see them breathing heavily, but it feels fake. In this film, they're fucking running. They're running their asses off, and when they're catching their breath, this isn't acting. This is fucking real. So yeah, the action's really good. That's all I really need to talk about when it comes to the technical aspects of this film. So when it comes to the main themes of this movie, there's really two things that are going on. The minor theme is the film kind of addressing the police corruption in Korea at the time, like kind of intertwining with the political climate that they were trying to address with that one rush scene that I was talking about. My father told me, actually, because he was about 18 at the time. He told me that a lot of policemen fabricated stories and evidences, and by torturing people and getting them to basically lie and make up stories in order to frame them as the murderer or the criminal. So it's just the film is just trying to portray the political state of the police force at the time, which is something that not a lot of movies, actually a lot of Korean movies do it, but when it comes to international films, it's not a lot of, because here's the thing, this movie does something very interesting. It portrays the police corruption that's happening in Korea at the time, but at the same time, it humanizes the policemen, because you can see their desperation. You can see why they're doing these really corrupted things to the people they bring to the police station. So it kind of creates this strange gray area where we're strangely like criticizing it, but at the same time we understand it. It's this really weird, fucked up moral place, and it just makes the film more interesting. Now, how does the story work? This is where it gets interesting, because there's a reason why I say this is one of the best screenplays that I've ever seen. At first, it kind of addresses the conflict between the local cop and the city cop that came down from Seoul. So there's this one scene where they're in a bar, and they're talking, and they're both drunk, and the local cop is talking about how all the city cops use their brains and scientific measurements and whatnot, but us local cops, we use our instincts and we get physical. We go out there into the field and we do shit, man, while you're just in the station doing some measurements and whatnot. And there's this one moment where he specifically taps his legs when he's talking about how local cops get out there into the crime scene. And this becomes really relevant later on, and I'll get to that later. But I love how this conflict kind of resolves itself by them coming together because they just yearn for this answer, because this murder mystery becomes so strange, and the answer seems so, abstract, and the whole thing seems so weird that they just because they're so desperate, the conflict slowly resolves, and they just come together as this one force. And it's a much more natural way than, there's for the film to just give them like a scene to resolve their conflicts. No, they gain each other's respect, because the city cop shows that using your brains works sometimes, but then there's this one moment where the local cop uses his instincts to find this one suspect that they're catching up with. So just with visual moments, they don't address it verbally, but with visual moments, they gain each other's respect, and they just come together, and the conflict resolves very naturally, which is, something that a lot of conflict-driven films have a hard time doing with. But then, later on in the movie, one of the local cop loses his leg, which kind of signifies the defeat of the local cop's side of this investigation. Because, like I said, he specifically tapped his leg at the bar when he was talking about the physical and the instinctive side of the investigation that the local cops can contribute. And then, at the end, it turns out all the clues that they accumulated about this murderer turns out to mean absolutely nothing, because the last murder that we see in this movie has nothing to do with the clues that they found. Like, every woman who was murdered and raped was wearing red clothing. It was raining at the time, and there was this one song that was playing on the radio. And it turns out at the last, when we see the last murder, the last person who gets murdered in this movie is not wearing any red clothing. There's no rain coming down, so clearly none of the clues made any sense at all. And that kind of signifies the defeat of the city cop, the brain side of the investigation. So they kind of everything just kind of comes back to square one, adding to that desperate feeling, that empty feeling of defeat. And then there's that last scene where the main local cop comes back to the crime scene, and he's looking at everything, and there's this one girl passing by, and the girl's like, what are you doing? And the cop's like, well, I was just kind of reminded of something that I did here. And then the girl just says, that's funny, because there's this one guy here like a few days ago, and he said the same thing. He said that he was reminded of the things that he did here a few years ago, and he just had to come back. And hold on just a few seconds. Okay, so I did kind of expect this review to be long, but apparently my camera cannot stand longer than 20 minutes at a time, so nobody's gonna fucking watch this review anyways. So you can clearly see that the local cop is still yearning for that answer, kind of adding, again, emphasizing the desperation that these people are going through. And the girl says, you know, she saw this other guy a few days ago who was also just kind of just walking around this crime scene, and the local cop asks if she saw the guy's face, and he asks what he looked like. And the girl just says he had a normal face, or just she says he had a plain face. I don't know exactly how it should like translate into English because I watched it in Korean without any subtitles because I'm bilingual, motherfucker. That's my superpower. So she says he's got a normal face, which kind of which is, I guess it's kind of talking about the anonymity of evil, which is kind of the same themes that the 80s slasher movies were kind of talking about when it comes to, like, putting serial killers in masks and whatnot. And it kind of also emphasizes the fact that the local cop will never catch the murderer because it could be fucking anybody. And at the last scene, in the last scene, the local cop looks into the camera and it fades away. And I feel like this looking into the camera bit can mean three things. It could mean that the guy's determined again, or maybe he's just confused. The second thing is that maybe he's looking at the audience because the girl said he's got a normal face. So the local cop is looking into the audience to find the murderer because it could be one of us. Or, and this is the creepy one that I thought of. Maybe he's looking at the murderer because at the time, this movie was made in 2003, so it was made like 17 years later after the murder cases. So clearly the murderer is still alive. So maybe he's looking at the murderer because the murderer might be watching this movie. I mean, if I were a serial killer and if I got away with my stuff and if they made a movie about the stuff that I did, I would go and watch it. Like, nobody would give a shit, so why not? It would be interesting. And it's such a chilling ending because so many other movies, they end on in the same way. Like they'll end with the character looking into the camera in a mysteriously, confused, determined, or conflicted way, and it's supposed to mean something, but it's usually just like a pretentious last shot to kind of, I don't know, add something to the movie. I'm not really sure, but in this film, there's so many ways we can interpret it, and it's fucking chilling. The way it leaves you with this sense of morbid emptiness, while at the same time making you understand exactly why you feel that way is goddamn horrifying. So, yeah, the movie's good. It's as good as everybody says it is. If you are not sure if everybody's right about this film, you're the one who's wrong, because it's good. I don't know what else to say. Watch it. Memories of Murder. Blah, blah, blah. Bye.